Thank you, Laurel. I'd like to invite the panel to come up now. I would introduce Lee Buckley, who will be moderating the panel. And then we also have 4 others. You've already met Dr. Boss. We have Erica Gerrity, Naomi Ward, and Shania Amundsen.
It's an honor for me to moderate this panel this morning. And we have a series of questions that we have prepared, and we're going to move right through those questions. I'm just going to ask the question, and then we can start with Erica and work our way down, if you don't mind. The first question is, what are some of the barriers you see to accessing mental health services for youth with incarcerated parents?
That one's on.
I'm not good with the technical stuff, so.
Two quick things that I can think of are, the first is I've been a clinician and worked in a couple of different clinics for the last 7 years as a therapist. And I'm the only clinician that I've ever met in my clinics that has any training or experience. Hello? So who has any experience in the criminal justice system? And I started taking interns from St. Kate's actually as a way to get more exposure to how the criminal justice system works so that people who go on to be social workers or clinicians have a better understanding and they're more able to help families navigate that system or understand some of the things that we're talking about today. Because I'm finding that if families go to those clinicians that don't have a background in the criminal justice system, they are not talking about this issue very much or at all. So maybe they've seen a therapist for 5 years, but they've never touched on the fact that their parent is incarcerated. And then their grandma knows that I have on my description, I work with families affected by incarceration. And then that becomes the focus of all of our therapy for the next 2 years. So more training for professionals, I think. And then a second thing I would say is availability and transportation for families that are maybe being cared for by a grandparent or a neighbor while their parent is away. And one of the fixes I've sort of found for that is I would work on Saturdays as a therapist, and then my whole day would be full, and a lot of grandparents wouldn't be at work. Children would not be as stressed from a full day of school. And they got some really good mental health care during that time.
I would definitely second all of the things that Erica said. I've been a social worker in the public schools, not currently, but for quite a few years. And one thing is that we often didn't know who had a parent incarcerated because people didn't ask the question. And I think for those students to access mental health services in the schools would be a really great thing. But I think we really need to think about the idea of stigma, and we don't want to pathologize the children whose parents are incarcerated. What I find, especially as a white woman, and 1 in 15 children who are African American are affected by this issue. I'm concerned about the lack of folks of color in the field and how we broach that subject as well.
Thank you. And so now we get to hear from some personal experience.
Yeah, from personal experience, I would say a barrier would definitely be just for myself, because while my mother was incarcerated for so long, I was in and out of placements. Like, when I say placements, I mean like group homes and, like treatment centers. I don't mean foster homes. So with that being said, when I went to placements, I would go on run, so I wouldn't get the mental health services. So I guess that was one of the biggest barriers, was not staying in a placement long enough to get the help that I needed, because for one, I didn't want it. I was so young and I was angry. So that's my barrier.
I certainly don't have much to add about the specific situation. These people are closer to it than I am. But I just wanted to say what a simple change by a therapist of doing therapy on Saturdays. What a simple and effective change. And there are many little things like that that we could change that are very effective, which means that you should have another day off in the week, of course. But I wanted to compliment that, and I also wanted to reemphasize the training of therapists has to be different than it has been in the past, because problems are different, they're bigger, and they're harder, and they're younger. And we really need to train therapists differently. And then I'll just end on the note that systemic work has more power than one-to-one work. And a lot of the work would be more cost-effective, probably, if the groups are larger, if you do peer groups or if you do family groups, and I hear you are doing that with grandparents or whatever. That kind of thing is very cost-effective, but more important is powerful for change in the youngster. Very good. So I just compliment you all, compliment you and your new baby.
Thank you, Dr. Boss, while you have the mic. What are the potential implications for youth with incarcerated parents who have undiagnosed or untreated mental health issues?
Well, you all know by now that I'm very wary of the mental health diagnoses for these kids. The situation is pathological without a doubt with parents here or there. So the situation is the problem, not the kid. So I'm also not naive, and I'm not against the medical view either. I think you need both, and the social view and the medical view. But I think if we focus only on the mental health problems of these kids, they hear that. And then they think, yeah, there's something really wrong with me. So again, I would externalize the problem, that the pathology lies in the external system, not in the child. But now their coping mechanisms may be maladaptive. That can be changed, but that's different than saying you're sick. So I just be careful with language and normalize what these kids are facing. You and I might face the same thing if we were in their shoes.
Shania?
Again, I think the problem with me was running away so much, because the placements would, they wanted me to get that help. They wanted me to heal from that and, go through the therapy and all that, and I just wasn't ready. So, with that being said, I had a lot of hard times. Like, I was really stressed out a lot, and I put myself in really dangerous situations from not getting the help that I needed. Just from being so young and not having anybody, just being in placements, and I didn't have family, and I never, had that feeling of like being loved that I needed from my mother, so.
And so looking back on that time period, why do you think running was a good solution for you?
Running away made me feel like I was doing what I wanted to do. Like I felt like the system was like taking my life away. Like they were like, oh, she has to go here because there's nowhere else to go, to the placement. And I'm like, I don't like placements. I don't like the group homes. I don't like the treatment centers. I didn't like anywhere that I went until after I left and graduated. But, like being there, I was so angry that I thought if I ran, it would be what I wanted. But when I ran, I wouldn't do anything good, and I would forget about what was going on in my life that was hurting me for the meantime. And then I'd get caught again and have to go right back to the same place and have to deal with them emotions again, and then I would just run. So with me, it was really hard. I didn't really get it together until I was about 17, so.
I think, Shania, that talks a lot about how we don't include youth in the decisions that are made for you, and how maybe that could make a difference in in getting that help. And so I think the implications are, is for this undiagnosed or untreated mental health is running away, trafficking, drug use and abuse, themselves getting caught up in the system and then starting the cycle all over again.
Yeah, trauma. Yeah. So I was going to give one example maybe of how to work with youth who are running a lot and not wanting to engage with therapists. And because what I hear Shania saying is she's trying to get some power and control back in her life in a place where she has no power and control. Right, and that's sort of developmentally appropriate, right, when you're a teenager? I think we have a lot of rules as therapists about one therapist can only see one member of the family, and then if you're going to do family therapy, then that you need to have another therapist for that type of work. Yes, I just break all those rules. I say I'm a therapist for your family. And then when it comes to Friday and you reflect on your week and you think, what did not go well this week or what did go well and do you want to talk about, I would say, come to therapy, bring who you want. I have the identified client. It's Naomi. I would say, Naomi, what do you want to talk about in therapy today and who do you want to be there? And then is there something that didn't go well and you don't want to talk about it? Do you just want your grandma to come? Do you want your grandma to get some help in learning how to deal with this because she's not doing this well and it's making it really hard for you? And then my client might say, yeah, I'm going to wait in the lobby and work on my homework. You talk to my grandma for 50 minutes, then I'll come back at the end, and then we'll kind of discuss. And I'd say, okay, that's great, let's do that. So that's maybe one way to be a little more innovative with relational
It's more than
family systems care.
It's respectful. I don't mean to.
It should be on.
I don't mean to interrupt you, except I want to applaud you.
Please interrupt me.
That's what you need to do. You need to collaborate with the young person.
Yeah.
The hierarchy of therapists knows best, child knows nothing, is no good. They will run. Usually when somebody rebels, there's a reason for it. The kid who runs away from a family where there's incest is the healthiest family member. So you may have had some health in running away. It was maladaptive, though it got you into other trouble. But your inclination to say, this doesn't feel right, we need to take a look at that. We need to collaborate. I just love what you just said. Yes, absolutely. Why not let the child help shape? Bring whom you want. That's how that woman brought a dog that time. Bring whom you want. And if you want somebody to sit out, shape it. I love it. Collaborative systems therapy. That's what that is.
Right. I think also when you've lived in a family where there's violence or trauma or loss, you're not always open to trusting a new person or building a genuine relationship because trust and love has been painful to you. And I worked with some youth that just had sort of straight out of the book, The Glass Castle, things that are just horrendous happened to them. And they really did, they wanted to get better, but they didn't want to see a therapist. But I felt like, well, this is your foster family, child protection is telling you must go to therapy. So what can we do together to begin to build trust? And that's not digging into your issues, right? It might be taking 6 months to just start to get a relationship. I've had kids who are scared and they don't want to come in the building. So then like the first day, their parents come and talk to me, or their foster parents, and they wait in the car. And then maybe they wait in the waiting room for like an hour, and then I talk to them for 5 minutes. And then maybe after like 2 or 3 visits, they come in my office for a little bit, slowly building trust that you're going to keep being there every time and that you're open to respecting their wants and their needs in their own process. So, yeah. Could do it in the car. Could do it sitting on the sidewalk. A walk, yeah.
Now, Erica, you've been very creative in your approach, and certainly the data demonstrates that incarceration confers considerable risk for youth with mental health. But what resources currently exist to support the mental health of youth with incarcerated parents? And then also what resources need to be in place to support these youth as well?
Well, I think what we know is that this particular group of young people has experienced lots of different trauma. And so that could be homelessness, that can be poverty, it can be physical, sexual abuse, those sorts of things. And so there's lots of agencies in the Twin Cities who work on those issues. The one piece, and I did lots of research in the last few weeks because I'm a little bit out of the mix, trying to find, is there an agency that's specifically focusing on youth with incarcerated parents? And I kind of knew the answer was no, but I just wanted to make sure. So there isn't, to my knowledge. I think there's individuals of us who know and have been trained and worked in criminal justice and then go out and work like I've worked in the schools, and so I could bring that particular lens to my work there. There's folks working in, juvenile detention centers, all of those places who are able to have this lens, but I couldn't say a name of one organization that's their sole purpose. And I kind of feel like that's necessary.
So Naomi, what about when you were working on the Mentoring Children with Prisoners project? What kind of resources were available then?
Sort of the same. I mean, I think that we would look at each youth individually, and then I would kind of work with the families to try to help them get set up. And so then you have the whole barrier of, do you have insurance? Do you have transportation to make it to an intake appointment? Often the families are so chaotic themselves that there's no way that they can add one more thing to their lives. So, I've done in-home therapy, and that often is a good help because you can be really creative. You show up at the house. I take my young person out to dinner, and then we kind of do therapy there, and it's weird. It's kind of weird, and it's not that confidential, but you make it work. But so in the Mentoring Children of Prisoners program, which doesn't really exist anymore, but it was a federal grant and lots of money was put into sort of developing it, the idea was that bringing in an adult into this child's life helps build resiliency, and that's absolutely true. Mentoring is super important, but you have to have the support of those mentors for it to be successful, because you're working with a whole lot of difficult things.
And so we were unable to sustain that effort because it was some one-time funding through the federal government.
It's one of those things that I think it was super popular for a while to talk about, right? So then you get lots of federal money or state money thrown at it, and then it loses its importance. And so you start these programs and then you leave them, which is worse for families at the end of the day.
I also want to go off script and ask another question. You mentioned insurance verification. The question is, utilizing this theoretical model of ambiguous loss, would that qualify for insurance coverage, or how creative would you have to be in order to be able to serve children and have it paid by insurance?
Well, first, you'd never put ambiguous loss down. It's a theoretical lens. It's a way of thinking. It's not a diagnosis. I really hope it never gets in a DSM. But I do hope that complicated grief gets in the DSM. And right now I said it's a footnote. Ambiguous loss could help complicated grief get into a DSM as a diagnosis eventually. But right now, don't think of it as a diagnosis. Think of it as a way for you to think about assessment and intervention, and also a way for you to bring the people you're working with, the youngsters you're working with, to think about their situation, because it is an ambiguous loss. It won't change. And so it may be a way that'll help them to gain more mastery in a functional way, which they absolutely need, to find an identity that's not one to be ashamed of, and to find meaning in their loss because it now has a name. So it's not a strategy. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of seeing the problem, making sense of it. You don't get that very often in clinical circles. You get strategies. I don't want you to think of it as that, and it's also not a diagnosis.
Thank you for that clarification. Shania, what resources have been most promising for you, and what has been most surprising for you?
I was trying to actually think of resources. Like I said, I didn't get it together until I was like 17. And when I say get it together, I mean like I didn't start going to therapy or anything like that or dealing with anything that I ever went through until I was about 17. I still don't have it all together, just so you know. um, but when I was going to therapy, it was like, yeah, your mom's in prison, okay, but this is what we're gonna work on. You know, it was pretty much, she was amazing. She was an amazing therapist. I trusted her. I just didn't, it was like she told me what we were gonna work on. It was her saying, this is what you need to work on, and me trusting her, I was like, okay, yeah, that's what I need to work on. And I still don't have everything sorted through. You know, I still have problems managing my emotions and differing them from other ones. Like, I don't know if I'm sad or angry. I don't know if I'm grieving or, you know, just feeling hopeless and lonely. I don't know how to manage those emotions yet, just because that's what we are working on. And there's other problems that needed to be addressed but weren't. So right now, I'm not in therapy. I do stuff like this, and I feel like it's therapy to me because I'm getting out and I'm telling my story. And when I was 12, I would have never even thought of doing something like this because I didn't want any of you people to know anything that I ever went through, because I felt like it was you guys who put me here and it was you guys who took my mom away. And, you know, but it was, now that I'm older and I have my own beautiful daughter, she made the decision to do that. She made the decision to, you know, do drugs and do whatever she wanted to do and get herself taken away from me. And she pretty much put me in this situation where I had to be in the system. It was nobody. It was not the jail people or the prison people or anybody in the system. It was her. And I blamed everyone else for the longest time, and I don't anymore. But promising, I can't think of anything. I'm sorry.
That's the truth. Yeah.
So I'm going to propose something that's radical to this question, and that is, what if we trained actually incarcerated parents to be a therapeutic resource to their own children? Wow. So I've seen this some. I've been a volunteer at MCF Shakopee since 2003, and I teach parenting groups there, and that parent is going to be in that child's life forever, and there's a lot of frequent communication. I know mothers who talk to their children every day from prison. So what happens when we're able to have moms come to a group, kind of work through some of their own, externalize some of their guilt and shame and self-blame, all of those things, and get to a place where they can be available, but we don't do it with like rose-colored glasses, like, and then you're going to get out and all life's going to be beautiful. But instead we say, you are connected to your child forever. You share a bond. You want that. Your child wants that. So what and how can you contribute to their lives positively? You know, there has been an injury that happened in the context of your relationship. There's an injury to your attachment. And we teach mothers kind of these words and these ideas. Now, how can you repair that? There's work that needs to be done there. And when you give people sometimes something constructive to work on, and then you practice it in a group, and then they have a visit with their children, suddenly they have some tools to heal some of that damage that's been done in. And then you see mothers start to rebuild their confidence as having value in their child's life. And maybe we could try to work on that some more.
Just because of my situation, I agree. I think that's an amazing idea. There's this thing, though, called jail talk, and my mother was very good at it. She's very good at manipulating me into thinking like, oh, we're gonna have a perfect family when we get out, and we're gonna have the perfect relationship, and everything's gonna be good. My mom just got out in September, and she's been there since I was 10. So she got out, and it was like, you know, like I'm thinking, oh yeah, she's gonna change, she's gonna be different, you know, like, but to back up a little bit, my mom has been in and out of jail my whole life. Like always been in and out. But when she stayed in, it was like she was saying, you know, there'd be times when she would be like, oh, I want to do this with my life and I want to do really good when I get out and, you know, whatever. And then there'd be times where she would talk about our family and be like, oh, I can't wait to, you know, do this when I get out, and it would be bad stuff. And my mom's out now and she's pretty much doing the same thing she was doing when I was 10. So not the same exact things, but she's not doing any better. So definitely getting help for, you know, youth and kids whose parents did want the, you know, relationship and they did want to be healthy. The parents just couldn't find that strength to actually do it. And I think help for youth with that situation would make a difference also.
Yeah, this is why we need what Naomi was saying is a place, because where do mothers who get out of prison that want to heal their relationships with their children and do better, where do they go for help? There are no places for that, you know, and I have, so I don't know if maybe people read the bio, but I work in the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, so I have mothers of incarcerated women, grandmothers of these children calling me saying, please, what can you do to help my daughter? Like, I see potential in her. I don't want this intergenerational trauma to continue. I don't know where to take her. I don't know how to help her. And so that sounds depressing, but let's move to the more positive thing, which is we've had these big initiatives in our state to end child trafficking. That's wonderful. We have clinics that are specifically tailored to the needs of autism. We should have a program that deals with this issue because we know that more children are affected by incarceration than autism and juvenile diabetes combined each year.
And we need to talk about it. I mean, we need in our schools, when I would know of a kid who had a parent in prison, I would ask them about it. I would say, oh, what's that like? Do you get to visit? When you visit, what does it sound like, smell like, feel like? You know, let's talk about that piece of it. And they would be like, oh, it's, you know, or I'm so sad I miss my parent. Well, let's write a letter to them. Like, bring it out into the open, not that it's this shameful, terrible thing that the child has to hold with them. And so I think, and we can all do that. We can all talk about it, and we can honor that child's loss in this way where sometimes they're gonna have a relationship with that parent on the inside. Like the woman that I mentored through Amicus, she was in for 8 years at Shakopee. She had 2 kids. She had been in twice, so she was gone most of their early childhood to early teen years. And it's been a real struggle for her now to have a relationship with them, but she has done it. And it's because she's had support in lots of different places. But she made the decision that she wanted to have that relationship with her kids. There's gonna be parents who just never can do it. And so then you build your psychological family, like Dr. Boss talked about. Yeah.
So can you continue to talk about those things that work? Are there other things that you can think of that actually work or things that you experienced, Shania, that actually worked?
Definitely being in the community, getting involved with the panel meetings, and I go to groups every Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm gonna start going to some domestic violence groups at the Division of Indian Work where I volunteer with my youth worker to work with the youth that we work with and do everything that we do with them. But definitely my workers are my family. Everyone at Division of Indian Work and my social worker who's here today, she's definitely been a very big support person for me. She's always been there. She has been since I turned 18 and I'm 19 today. So, yeah, today is my birthday. So definitely, I guess just workers pretty much were what helped me, I guess. Doing this, talking and getting people to listen and knowing that people want to know about my life and other youth's life is helpful.
I don't know that I can add anything to your expertise. It's just awesome. I congratulate you because we learn from you. We learn from the people who have become resilient. That's how you learn about resilience. But I just wanted to say the power of the peer group again, and the psychological family, and it certainly sounds like your social worker is part of that, and other people. And the other thing is, like the Jack Saul book I told you after 9/11, getting the kids to actually do things. What you are saying, if I hear you, is rather than sitting and talking, we should, at least as much as we do that, do things in the community with this person you're trying to work with. And you absolutely are doing good work now. We are collaborating in the best sense of the word, in that we're learning from you. You are helping people in violent family situations now. It's incredible. It's just incredible. Congratulations to you. This is the best outcome one could hope for, so that you're a major contribution to the community now. You're a helper. You're just a step away from going back to school, aren't you? Yes. Well, professors always talk like that.
I'm actually hoping to go to school for youth work. I wanted to be a nurse when I was younger, so when I was 17 and I was in Heartland Girls Ranch for 7-8 months, I got my CNA license while I was there, and that was actually the first placement that I never ran from. I tried to run my second day. I ran my second day, but they caught me. I got caught. And I stayed there and I finished the program with, I not graduated, but I left successfully. So, first program ever.
Well, I can say that I work for an agency now that is looking for certified nursing assistants. So let's talk. And I should say, being a nurse makes a lot more money than being a social worker. But one thing that I wanted to piggyback on that you said is how you feel like your best therapy has been sort of getting involved in the community and doing that piece. And I think that that's something as mental health professionals, as social workers, for us to think about, rather than let's sit in a room and let's have therapy, which is obviously very beneficial, and I am a proponent of it, but how do we get folks or youth involved? And then that really, right, it's like you're paying it back, but you're getting something.
What Division of Indian Work actually does, I actually volunteered to help out with the Thanksgiving dinner that we did at Division of Indian Work. I just said, there's not a lot of youth that have family to go to for Thanksgiving. I know I thought I wouldn't. I went to her father's families for Thanksgiving. I didn't know I was going to do that, but I ended up doing that. So we set up an event for Thanksgiving so that youth could come eat at the Division of Indian Work for Thanksgiving, because they didn't have nowhere to go, they didn't have family. So it's events like that we do, and we do these, Division of Indian Work. A lot of the youth there go to the panel meetings and speak. The groups that we do are always fun. We always have food, and who doesn't love food? So we do that, and we do a lot of things that are in the community. We have a bowling event on Friday for foster care youth, and some of the Division of Indian youth are going. So even if they're not in foster care, they're invited.
That's great. In our last 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, one aspect of this issue that we have not addressed is the caregivers, and not necessarily the parents, but the folks that take care of the children on behalf of the parents. Are there any comments on resources or engagement, how important that engagement is? Looks like you're ready, Shania.
Yeah. Caregiver. Negatively, when I was on run, I did not have a caregiver. I was my caregiver. Therefore, I got involved with, I was sexually exploited, and being on run, that was pretty much how I survived. And then positively, the caregiver were always the staff at placements that I ever went to, group homes, stuff like that. Some of them were supportive, some of them should have lost their jobs a long time ago, but they still somehow work there. So I would say definitely positively, my caregivers have always been professionals.
One thing that we haven't talked very much about and briefly is just sort of the visitation issue. And there's differing opinions about whether or not you should bring the children in to visit their parents, and I think it can be done in a really positive way. And we know that when quote-unquote offenders maintain contact with their family, they do better when they get out, and that's ultimately what we want because that's best for everybody. And the children, if the parents are in a place to have those visits, we need to help the caregivers get them there. And so we have a huge issue of transportation. Prisons are all over, they're super far away, and there's not public transportation. And it's a huge barrier. And so in states where they have, buses that pick up families and bring them there, that's amazing. And I know there's some federal prison programs that used to operate in Minnesota. I don't know that it does anymore, but that's another thing that we need to do.
Yes, I would say the women at Shakopee would echo that, and that's, we try to take the lead from what women are asking for in prison, and that's one of the biggest issues. But to touch on the caregiver, I would encourage people who are school social workers or mental health providers or skills workers or whatever you're doing. I heard Krista Nelson talking at trauma training last spring, and she was talking about working with a youth who was in foster care, and the mother was in prison and some really bad things had happened, and she was talking about working with the youth and working with the child or the caregiver, and I just thought, like, the mother can be engaged from prison. You can do therapeutic work with a parent who is incarcerated, and that might be through letter writing, that might be through the caregiver going to visit with them to piece together some parts of the child's life that are really missing. And we just had a mom in our group who was telling us some just really, really terrifying things, and she said, I don't think the caregiver of my children really know that this happened to them, and I'm worried about A, B, and C. Help me figure out how I can effectively communicate that to the caregiver of my children to help my children. Wow, that is great, right? Let's try to put all these pieces together to help children heal and not exclude the incarcerated parent. Really trying to move away from this narrative of a good and a bad person, and that all people have good things to offer, and particularly mothers. I've never met a mother who just says, I'm done, I give up, I want no role in my child's life. Maybe they feel like they don't have a right to have a role in their child's life, but mothers do want to be engaged, so really keep that in mind. And I don't speak with fathers, so I can't speak to that, but it's hard for me to imagine that they feel differently than that.
We have so many more questions that we would like to ask. We have so many more comments that we would like to hear from you, but unfortunately our time today is limited. I want to take the time right now to thank each and every one of you. Dr. Boss, thank you very, very much. Shania, thank you for being authentic and transparent with us. We so appreciate it. And Naomi, thank you for being here and for all the work that you're doing both in the schools and have done in the past. Thank you for continuing that passion. And Erica, thank you so much for being here today and all of your work with the young mothers. As I mentioned, we'll not have enough time to take questions from you, but there's sheets on each table. We want to hear your questions. We want to know what those questions are. And so please, as you're thinking of them or please leave them on the table, write them down and leave them. So again, thank you for our panelists. Thank you for our speaker. I want the Strengthening Families affected by incarceration members or folks who have at least attended one meeting to stand up right now. I want to thank this group for their passion and for their continuing desire and to move things forward. Let's give them a hand. There's many more of us. We meet on the second Wednesday of each month, so we would have met yesterday, but we put that off for our session today. As you know, this is the third of our final forums that we've planned on these topics on children affected by incarceration based on the information from the Minnesota Student Survey. We will be having a strategic planning, going through a strategic planning process. And so our January meeting on January 13th will be a look backwards. It will be looking at what we have accomplished in accordance with our work plan and with our collaborative partners over the last few years. It's phenomenal that the work that's been done in this area. And so we're going to take a look at that at our January meeting. And then we're looking for a 4-hour window to bring some folks together, and it's open to everyone, to actually go through a facilitated strategic planning process on how we should move forward. We want to continue to get this word out. Our meetings are, you can also participate in our meetings through a webinar. So I would encourage you to make sure that you get one of our flyers that's out front. It has our web address on it. And again, you could also tweet us. And I think there's an email address that's available as well. I'm asking because I'm not the recipient of the emails. On the website where you can send information, but we really would like for you to be engaged. You can see in the brochure that there are many more partners than what's listed as our sponsors. And so I want to take the time also to thank our sponsors again. We would not have been able to do this without working collaboratively. And so again, especially the Central Minnesota Inside Out Connections, the Minnesota Council on Crime and Justice, Hennepin County Children's Mental Health Collaborative, the Minnesota Department of Corrections, which is where I work, the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, thank you, Rayon, and then Wilder Research. And as we thank Wilder Research, again, all 3 forums have taken place here. And Wilder has a phenomenal staff that has helped with the logistics, with the accommodations. They've done a wonderful job. And a special thank you to Julie, who's still working, but thank you, Julie, for the wonderful work that she's done with these 3 forums.